This is a 2001 Lamborghini Diablo 6.0. It is the ultimate final version of the Lamborghini Diablo, which was, quite simply, the single craziest car of the 1990s. And today, I've borrowed this one from a viewer here in the Philadelphia area to show you exactly what I mean. I'll start with some basics. The Diablo first came out in the early 1990s as a successor to the Lamborghini Countach. Early models were raw and basic, but the car evolved over time, especially when Audi bought Lamborghini in 1998. That's when they started development for this version, the 6.0, which uses a 550 horsepower V12, does 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, and can reach 202 miles an hour. That sounds pretty cool on paper, but while some cars are all about 0 to 60 in tenths of a second and precise Nürburgring lap times, this isn't a car you appreciate on paper. This is a car you have to see to believe. So today I'm going to take you on a tour and I'm going to show you all the weird things about this car, and then I'm going to get it out on the road and find out how the Lamborghini Diablo drives. Now, to hear more about my Lamborghini Diablo experience and driving this car, something I've always wanted to do since I was a kid, click the link below for my column on autotrader.com/oversteer. I'll start by simply getting inside. Now, the door motion is cool. We'll get to that in a second, but before we do, let's talk about the lock and unlock noises. You press the little button on the key fob to lock it. That's the lock noise. Unlock it. And now it's unlocked. Now, to get inside, you push down on this little thing with the keyhole. You pull up on the handle itself. There we go. Now the door is up, and that looks really cool. Unfortunately, the next part doesn't look really cool. That's actually getting inside. Oh, there we go, now I'm in. Now when you get inside, the very first thing you notice is there's not a lot of room to put your stuff. For example, there's no glove box. Instead, Lamborghini has come up with some creative storage solutions that only Lamborghini could. For example, there is a storage compartment behind the seats, but you can't open it if the seats are in any reasonably comfortable position. There's also a storage compartment on the doors, which seems helpful, but then it violently retracts every time you try and open it and bounces back into place. And then there's my favorite compartment, this one on the ceiling, which can hold your sunglasses or your garage door opener, but probably not both. Speaking of that center area on the ceiling, you'll also notice up there a few other interesting things. For example, that's where the directional light is located. You can point it wherever you need to see. Also up there, as expected, is the interior dome light. What isn't as expected is how you control the interior dome light. You'd think it'd be a little button on the light, but actually it's a button next to the parking light, the rear fog light, and the front fog light. I guess Lambo figured, it all lights up. Let's just throw it together in the center console. Of course, that isn't the only strange button in the center console. Let's talk briefly about the door lock and unlock buttons. One of them shows a picture of a door. The other shows a picture of a door with a key. Which one is lock and which one is unlock? That's up to you to figure out. Now, moving up the center console, we have a couple of other interesting things. For example, there are a couple of lights that you can turn on, but they don't really do anything except maybe illuminate your shoulder. The other interesting thing is that the seat belts are both in the middle. I guess that's what happens when you have scissor doors. You can't really mount the seat belts right over here. There's no room for them. Another interesting thing behind the seats, to make the car more usable compared to the earlier Diablo models, they've installed in this one coat hooks. I have no idea why. There's even one on the driver's side. I strongly suspect no one has ever used these coat hooks in the history of the Lamborghini Diablo, but they're there. But the coat hooks aren't anywhere near the strangest thing on the top of the car. That honor goes to the sun visors. Now, you turn the sun visors over and there's a little warning label there, like there is on all cars, that warns you that death or serious injury can occur. Except they misspelled serious. Take a look at that. And it wasn't just a small mistake one time, they also misspelled serious on the passenger side visor. So clearly they looked everything over before they finished this car and put it on the road. But this isn't the only hilarious example of bad proofreading as it relates to the Lamborghini Diablo 6.0. In the middle, you'll find a couple of buttons, an up arrow, a down arrow, one marked auto, and 1, 2, 3, 4 lights. We couldn't figure out what that was, so we consulted the owner's manual. On page 77, it very clearly describes its suspension settings, and it lists what each thing is. Number 1, soft setting. Number 2, medium setting. Number 3, also medium setting. I don't know why you have 2 medium settings. And number 4, it just says setting. It doesn't get more Italian than that. But all proofreading mistakes are forgiven when it comes to the center console because it also holds the coolest thing about this car, that amazing gated shifter. Just look at it. It's beautiful. Interestingly, this car is only a 5-speed manual. That's a dogleg shifter with reverse where you'd probably expect first to be. Fortunately, you'll never mistake first and reverse because Lamborghini has engineered a rather interesting reverse lockout in this car. You actually have to turn the entire shift lever about halfway in order for it to go into reverse. That is good thinking. Next, we move on to the climate controls, which have a couple of interesting quirks about them. Number one is the recirculating air button. It shows air recirculated inside a car, and that car is shaped like a Lamborghini Diablo. That is cool attention to detail. Less attention to detail is the fact that when the climate controls are off, they still show your previous setting, maybe the climate you could have if you wanted to turn them on. You can never really turn off the screen of the climate controls that shows what temperature it could be. Now, moving on to the gauge cluster, it's pretty normal. You got your speedometer, you got your tank, you got a few gauges for oil temperature, water temperature, but there's also a button that looks like a piece of suspension. That's actually an axle lifting system. This had to have been one of the very first cars, if not the first car, with an axle lifter. Push it, and the front end rises ever so slightly so you can clear speed bumps. Another interesting thing, on the gauge cluster, you'll notice that there's no place for all the warning lights, the turn signals, the headlights, and check engine light, all that stuff. It turns out the dashboard is actually 2 levels, and in between the 2 levels, there's a tinted piece of plastic that includes all that stuff. There's the turn signals and the lights and everything that you might expect. The weird thing is, why is it tinted? You can't really see it, and those are the important things that you really want to see, but that's Lamborghini. Oh, and one other interesting quirk I forgot to mention, that would be the key and key fob. I'll start with the key. The interesting thing about the key is there's no hole in it so you can stick it on your key ring. Instead, you wrap your key ring around the middle section. I've never seen anything like this before. But the key fob is even stranger. It doesn't say Lamborghini, doesn't have a bull on it. Instead, it's this square thing with one single button and a lot of unused space, and for some reason there's a bunch of silver stuff and a lot of numbers on it. This was keyless entry back in the 90s. Now, around to the front trunk. You open it with a little lever next to the steering wheel inside, and it houses a couple of interesting things. My personal favorite is inside the Lamborghini branded pouch, inside the Lamborghini branded toolkit, you will find a Lamborghini branded box of bulbs and fuses. In any other car, a box of bulbs and fuses would be worth about $7, but this one has the Lamborghini logo on it, so I suspect it's more like $700. 2 other interesting things in the front trunk. Now, a lot of cars in their trunks or on their door jambs have a little label that tells you the color code that the vehicle has. In this one, it's handwritten. I've never seen that before. I don't know why Lamborghini thought that would stand up to the test of time, but actually it has pretty well. Nonetheless, this car has a handwritten color code. The other interesting thing is the car cover. It's yellow. It has a giant Lamborghini logo on it. Of course it does. And one of the other interesting things about this car is the sheer amount of carbon fiber. There's carbon fiber on the door sills, carbon fiber up and down the sides. The entire center console is this beautiful carbon fiber. And this was in a time when most cars didn't really have that much carbon fiber. But the coolest carbon fiber piece is this thing, the wing. If you know the Diablo 6.0, you know most of them don't have wings, but this one does. It was a factory option and it cost almost $5,000 15 years ago. And since we're back here, one of my favorite little features of the Diablo, lift up the hood, which by the way is carbon fiber, and you'll notice that on the engine, printed there, you have the Lamborghini logo, the bull. It says V12 6.0. It has Lamborghini written in their distinctive font, and they have the firing order of the cylinders written there, which I've always thought is so cool. This is an incredible view. They can't spell serious right, but they can get all that stuff. And I think that is probably more important. Now, since we're outside, up front we have one of the most interesting quirks of the entire Diablo 6.0, and that is its headlights. Now, the earlier Diablo models had pop-up headlights, but by the time the 6.0 came out, Lamborghini was like, pop-ups are too 90s, we need a fixed headlight. But at the time, they were also spending a lot of resources creating the Murcielago, which came out very soon after, so they didn't want to put a lot of effort into designing their own headlight. So they borrowed a headlight from the Nissan 300ZX. That's right, the Lamborghini Diablo Italian V12 uses a Nissan 300ZX headlight. And here's the crazy thing. You see this little carbon fiber lip on the headlight? You wonder, why would that possibly be there? It's because the headlights come from Nissan with the Nissan logo printed up here. Lamborghini covers that up with this little carbon fiber lip. So you have your cool little carbon fiber on your headlights of the Lamborghini. Well, it's not to save weight and it's not functional. Instead, it's to cover up the fact that they borrowed their headlight from the Nissan 300ZX. Now, since we're talking about lighting, here's another interesting quirk, is the turn signal. Now, the brake light gets its entire circle, as you can tell, but the turn signal shares a circle with the reverse light. The weird thing is the reverse light, which is never on, gets 2/3 of the circle, and the turn signal, which theoretically is on a lot, gets only 1/3. Makes no sense, but it's Lamborghini. So the Diablo has some cool features and some weird Italian characteristics, and it also looks like nothing else on the road. But now it's time to find out the most important thing, how it drives. All right, we're gonna drive the Diablo here. Another interesting quirk I've just learned is that it requires you to push not only the clutch when you want to start it, but also the brake. You have to push both pedals in order to start this thing. Oh boy, okay, driving position is interesting. I mean, the pedals are very there's actually a lot of room for my leg, but then the pedals are very close together. The dead pedal area is just massive. It takes up about half of the pedal. All right, take this thing out, see what happens. Nothing like a gated shifter, it just feels so good. One interesting thing is you have an incredible view down here because the window curves downward. And so you can see like all of the road on the other side of the road. It makes no sense. Boy, this is a crazy view in this car. Sometimes you get in an exotic car and you don't really tell that you're in an exotic car when you're driving it down the road. And this thing, I look in the mirror, there's the wing. I look over here, I got this crazy door thing and these wide mirrors. It is so cool looking. And the driving position is so bizarre. This thing is very clearly an exotic car from when you're sitting in it. Boy, the sound is nice. I actually find the Murcielago to be a little bit tighter than this, believe it or not. The only thing that I find a little tight is the pedal situation. I actually have a lot of room for myself, and I have a ton of room for my shoulder. I feel okay. I'm tall. I'm 6'4" or whatever. And I have I feel pretty good in this thing, with the exception of the pedals. I have big feet, and it's very tight in there. Yeah, this thing comes a little too far over and robs some headroom, but just up here, there's actually quite a bit of headroom. It's surprising. Getting it started is actually not so hard. The clutch isn't as heavy as some older exotic. Testarossa clutch is much heavier than this. I like that the speedometer just sort of nonchalantly 40, 60, 80. It's like, who gives it? Who cares what 35? I mean, I'd love to go 35, but I have no idea where to find it on the speedometer. The thing about the 6.0 is it is the end of the line, and they created it after Audi already bought the company. So this car has some Audi touches in it in the sense that they were like, we're not going to let Lamborghini get away with stupid, crazy stuff anymore. We need to do some more reasonable things. I mean, how do you not do that? I just feel like the coolest person in the world. The ride is monstrously harsh. I mean, even going over those crosswalks and stuff, it's like, oh. The modern cars have these abilities to do, you push a button and then it makes it harsher or less harsh or whatever. This one's in one, so that's the softest.
Yeah, we're in soft.
And it's still, maybe we should try normal or possibly normal. Man, this is so cool.
Yeah.
This is just the coolest. You know, it feels, you feel that engine when you accelerate. You feel it shaking and stuff. Some cars, you know, like Porsches, you look down, you're going 100, you're like, oh my God. Yeah. And that's not the case in the Lamborghini Diablo. You're well aware of how fast you're going. That engine doesn't let you forget it. It doesn't go between the gates as easy as the Ferrari shifters. The Ferrari shifters are smoother, but the Lambo shifter in some senses feels better because you feel like you're doing more work to like really, like I'm driving this car, you know? Yeah, I mean the steering is very heavy, but it's like a precise type heavy. Yeah. It's not as precise as a modern exotic. I mean 458 is like next level. Yeah. Not even similar. But it still handles really well. I mean there's no body roll or anything like that. You can just hear. Sitting at the light, the car doesn't shake and rumble like some old crappy car, but you hear that motor. I mean, you're not, in some exotics, even in modern Lamborghinis, the Huracan, you are insulated from that motor at the stoplight. It feels like an Audi. In this thing, you know what's back there. Oh, look at this, a Cyclone. Wow. The thing about about this car that I really like, the sensation of speed matches the actual speed.
Oh, yeah.
So you really know, it's not like Porsche where you're like insulated. You think you're going fast, that's because you are going fast. Man, it's totally explosive. The engine you start hearing that sound and feeling everything. This is the last of those exotic supercars where you were part of the car and you had to sort of work to get there and you feel everything. And after that, everything became a little bit more neutered. Some cars still had stick shifts, but this is the last of those like really old school high performance driving experiences. It is not as precise or as fast as something like a 458 or a Huracan or something like that, but it makes you happy in other ways. That's the whole point of one of these older cars. It is still modern car fast. You wouldn't think it's slow, but it makes you very happy when you hear that and when you feel that and when you shift those gears in a way that it's hard to equal in a modern car, even if a modern car can do 0 to 60 a full second faster. So that's the Lamborghini Diablo 6.0, the ultimate final iteration of the crazy Lamborghini Diablo, which is now one of the coolest cars I've ever driven. Between its crazy quirks and features and its raw driving experience and its ridiculous appearance, there's no doubt that the Lamborghini Diablo was the craziest car of the 1990s. Modern Lamborghinis are a lot more practical and a lot more usable now, but they're also a lot more sterile, which is a word I would never use to describe this thing. No light is located. You can point it wherever you need to see, or not see, depending on whether it's working.